Dr. Amanda Mitchell's coffee cup shattered against the pristine floor of the Xenobiology Conference's main hall. The holographic display above her head continued broadcasting the emergency signal from Kepler 186f, its red warning bands a stark contrast to the elegant white architecture of the Singapore Science Center. This is an automated distress beacon from New Hope Colony. We are under attack. Repeat. We are under attack. Multiple orbital strikes detected. Heavy casualties reported at. The message cut to static before resuming. Primary Education Center has been hit. No survivors in sectors 7 through 12. All emergency responders. The room of 200 leading xenobiologists fell silent. Amanda's hands trembled as she pulled up her personal comlink. Her daughter Jessica had sent a message just 3 hours ago, sharing pictures of her third-grade class's science projects. Little experiments about growing plants in Kepler 186f's unique soil. 24 bright faces beaming at the camera, proud of their first steps into scientific discovery. "No," Amanda whispered, her voice carrying in the deathly quiet room. "No, no, no." The emergency broadcast shifted to orbital footage. A HFY battle group hung in high orbit over the colony, their crystalline ships refracting the red dwarf's light like massive prisms. Energy weapons lanced downward with surgical precision, each beam targeting what their sensors must have identified as centers of human learning and development. Their strikes had been precise, efficient, and completely intentional. The primary school hadn't been collateral damage, it had been the target. Professor James Henderson, Amanda's mentor and the conference keynote speaker, moved through the crowd toward her. His weathered face, usually animated with enthusiasm for alien biology, had turned to stone. "Amanda, I'm so sorry. We need to." "They knew," she cut him off, her voice shifting from grief to something harder. "The Zaxray Embassy requested our colony's infrastructure layouts last month. They said it was for planning trade routes." Her fingers flew across her tablet, pulling up the diplomatic correspondence. They asked specifically about educational facilities, to better understand human developmental stages. The room's atmosphere changed. 2 centuries of peaceful scientific cooperation with alien species had taught humanity many things. Among them was the understanding that sometimes rage could be cold, clinical, professional. Across the conference hall, hundreds of tablets and phones chimed simultaneously. The United Earth Parliament had convened an emergency session. The vote was displayed in real time. 500 votes cast in under 30 seconds, all identical. The measure passed with unanimous consent for the first time in 50 years. The Zaxray Confederation had violated the New Geneva Convention's strictest provision, the protection of children during interstellar conflicts. But they hadn't just killed children, they had deliberately targeted them. 147 young lives, extinguished to make a point about humanity's perceived weakness. Amanda stood slowly, smoothing her conference blazer with mechanical precision. Around her, other scientists were doing the same. Presentations were being closed. Research data was being secured. Equipment was being packed with methodical efficiency. "They believe our emotional nature makes us primitive," Professor Henderson said quietly, watching the organized withdrawal. "They expect us to break down, to retreat in fear." He paused, observing the cold, coordinated purpose filling the room. "They don't understand what they've done." Amanda's tablet showed Jessica's last message again, her daughter's bright smile, surrounded by her students. Future scientists, doctors, explorers, all their potential turned to ash by beings who saw human emotion as weakness. "No," Amanda agreed, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of human evolution, of a species that had clawed its way up from prey to apex predator, that had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts, that had looked into the abyss of nuclear war and chosen to reach for the stars instead. They really don't. As she walked out of the conference hall, Amanda noticed the subtle shift happening across Earth. Social media networks, usually buzzing with constant activity, fell quiet. No hashtags. No viral outrage. No calls for action or justice. Just millions of humans quietly booking transport back to their homeworlds, answering humanity's oldest call, the need to protect their young. The last thing she saw before leaving was the Zaxray cultural exchange officer, standing confused in the corner, unable to understand why the humans' emotional displays of grief had been replaced by something far more dangerous: silence. Ambassador James Cooper adjusted his charcoal suit jacket as he walked into the Galactic Council's primary chamber. The massive room, designed to accommodate representatives of over 300 species, had never felt so charged with tension. Crystalline lighting arrays cast rainbow refractions across the curved walls, a feature usually admired for its beauty. Today, it felt like watching light scatter through the scales of a coiled serpent. The Zaxray ambassador, High Diplomatic Coordinator Valsha, stood at the central podium. His iridescent carapace gleamed as he gestured with 4 upper limbs, presenting data streams that supposedly justified the attack on Kepler 186. The human tendency toward emotional decision-making represents an existential threat to galactic stability, Valsha declared, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into standard galactic. Our preventive action was regrettable but necessary. The statistics clearly show. Statistics. Cooper's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. He hadn't raised it, hadn't shown any sign of the fury that every human on Earth was feeling. That was what terrified the older species in the room. They had expected shouting, threats, displays of what the Zaxray called primitive emotional responses. Instead, Cooper walked to his podium with measured steps. "Let me share some statistics of my own." He pressed a single control, and the chamber's holographic display shifted. The image of a classroom appeared, captured just hours before the attack. Children's laughter filled the room as they worked on their science projects. 24 students in Miss Jessica Mitchell's 3rd grade class, Cooper continued, his voice professionally neutral. Average age, 8 Earth years. They were studying xenobotany, learning how to grow food in alien soil, preparing to help feed future colonies. The recording continued playing. Several alien representatives shifted uncomfortably as they watched the young humans' enthusiasm for understanding other worlds. "Here's another statistic," Cooper said, advancing the display. Time between the Zaxray's request for educational facility layouts and their attack, 27 days. Time they spent planning the deaths of children while pretending to pursue cultural exchange. The Arthean representative, Ambassador Enkstill, rose from their seat. The ancient spacefaring species had been humanity's first alien contact, and their long association had taught them to read human behavior better than most. The Arthean Collective formally withdraws all diplomatic and economic ties with the Zaxray Confederation, they announced, their feathered crest rippling with distress. "We strongly advise the Confederation to reconsider their current course of action." Valsha's mandibles clicked in what his species considered amusement. "The human's emotional instability has clearly influenced your judgment, respected Arthean. Our battle fleets are technologically superior. Our defensive capabilities are unmatched. What possible concern?" "You still don't understand," Enkstill interrupted, their translator struggling to convey their tone. "The humans aren't preparing for battle. They're not even preparing for war." They turned to look at Cooper, who stood silently at his podium. "They're preparing to solve a problem." The chamber erupted in overlapping translator signals as multiple species began withdrawing their ambassadors from Zaxray space. The collective memory of Rigel, oldest of the Council species, simply shut down their embassy's quantum channel without comment. Cooper watched it all with the same measured calm. When Valsha demanded an explanation for this emotional overreaction, the human ambassador finally spoke again. "The last time humanity went quiet like this," he said, "we weren't broadcasting our rage across social networks. We weren't making threats. We were solving equations, calculating trajectories, writing code." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Would you like to know what we're calculating now?" The chamber fell silent as Cooper walked toward the exit, He stopped beside Valsha, speaking softly enough that only the Zaxray's translator could hear him. Your species believes that emotion makes us weak. You see our capacity for love, especially for our children, as an evolutionary flaw. He smiled, and several nearby representatives took involuntary steps backward. You're about to learn why Earth's prehistoric apex predators went extinct while our ancestors, the ones who would die protecting their young, survived. As Cooper left the chamber, the Arthian ambassador began evacuating their embassy staff from Zaxray space. Their final diplomatic transmission contained only 3 words: remember the dinosaurs. The Zaxray would soon learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military might. It was their evolutionary heritage as social predators who would spend millions of years perfecting the art of solving problems permanently. Colonel Michael "Iron Mike" Thompson stood at the command center of Luna Base, watching the holographic display as thousands of ships converged on Earth. The movement wasn't chaotic. Each vessel followed precise protocols, flowing into predetermined formations with practiced efficiency. Civilian freighters smoothly transformed into supply ships. Private yachts became medical transports. Mining vessels, their extraction equipment already being converted to military specifications, fell into escort positions. "Sir," Lieutenant Sarah Brooks called from her station, "the Phoenix Protocol is showing 97% civilian compliance. The remaining 3% are vessels already committed to emergency services or colonial evacuation." Thompson nodded, allowing himself a grim smile. The Zaxray intelligence services were undoubtedly watching this mobilization, but they wouldn't understand what they were seeing. They'd expect panic, confusion, perhaps even some resistance to military authority. Instead, they were witnessing 2 centuries of preparation unfolding like clockwork. "The Queensbury Protocol suspension is confirmed," Captain Robert Chen reported, his fingers dancing across his tactical display. "All ships are acknowledging receipt, shifting to Wardham navigation protocols." Now, the massive display shifted, showing hundreds of blue dots changing to red. Not the color of anger, the color of purpose. Every human ship was now operating under rules of engagement that hadn't been used since the early space age. The Zaxray would interpret this as humanity abandoning civilization. They'd be wrong. Humanity wasn't abandoning anything. They were simply setting aside restraint. "Message from Master Sergeant Emily Rodriguez, sir," Brooks announced. "She's reactivating her commission along with the entire 7th Special Operations Veterans Group. They're reporting to Norfolk Space Dock within 12 hours. Thompson remembered Rodriguez. She'd retired 3 years ago to run a coffee shop in New Seattle. She made the best espresso in the solar system and kept a collection of vintage combat knives on her wall. Each one, she told customers, had a story. Now she and thousands of other veterans were returning, bringing with them the kind of experience that couldn't be replicated in simulations. "Sir," Chen interrupted, "we're picking up Zaxray communications. They're laughing at us. Their analysts think they've discovered our secret military doctrine in the Queensbury Protocol references." "Let them laugh," Thompson replied, watching as another wave of ships aligned perfectly with the growing formation. "They're looking for a military response. They expect us to behave like every other species, to follow the standard protocols of interstellar warfare." He paused, studying the tactical display. "They don't understand that humans don't fight wars anymore. We solve problems." The command center hummed with activity as reports flowed in from across human space. Industrial centers were smoothly transitioning to military production. Research facilities were unlocking classified projects that had been developed and stored away, hoping they'd never be needed. Retired soldiers and sailors were reporting for duty, bringing with them the muscle memory of skills they'd never truly forgotten. "Message from Delta Station," Brooks reported. "Dr. Elizabeth Parker requests permission to activate Project Lighthouse." Thompson felt a chill run down his spine. Project Lighthouse had been developed by Parker's team as a theoretical exercise, a way to track every ship in a sector by using the quantum wake signatures they left in hyperspace. It had been shelved because it violated too many privacy concerns. "Granted," he said quietly. "Tell her to light it up. All of it." The display flickered, then expanded. Suddenly, they could see everything. Every Zaxray ship, every hidden military installation, every secret supply cache. The aliens had spent decades building their superior military force. Humans had spent those same decades figuring out how to take such forces apart. "Sir," Chen said, his voice tight with controlled emotion, "we're receiving a transmission from New Hope Colony. It's the final recording from the school." Thompson straightened his uniform. "Play it." The command center fell silent as children's voices filled the air, singing the good morning song. Then the alarms, then the screams, then silence. "Send that to every ship in the fleet," Thompson ordered, "and prepare to implement Operation Stormbreak." He looked at the display one last time, watching humanity's response unfold with terrible purpose. It's time to teach the galaxy why Earth's history books are filled with extinct species who thought they could prey on our children. Katie Williams stood in her office on the Zaxray homeworld, watching the sunset paint the crystalline spires of Morning City in shades of purple and gold. Her desktop terminal displayed a simple message: "Protocol Phoenix activated. Initiate departure sequence." Below that, a timer counted down from 30 minutes. She took a sip of coffee from her "I debug your nightmares" mug, a joke gift from her Zaxray colleagues who had never quite understood human humor. For 6 years, she'd maintained their quantum communication networks, quietly improving their efficiency, adding layers of code that seemed like routine updates. Katie, her assistant, Junlai, clicked his mandibles in concern as he entered the office. "The news from the human colony. I want you to know that many of us don't agree with." "I'm resigning," she interrupted softly, setting down her mug. "Effective immediately. The paperwork has already been filed." Junlai's antennae twitched in confusion. "But the central network requires your authorization codes for the daily security updates. The quantum tunnels need maintenance. The orbital defense grid." "I know." Katie's fingers danced across her keyboard, entering a complex sequence of commands. Across Morning City, thousands of other human tech workers were doing the same. "We're all leaving, taking our code with us." The first system crashed exactly 17 minutes later. The quantum communication network, designed by humans decades ago, discovered that its core protocols had been quietly removed. Backup systems tried to engage, only to find that their authentication keys no longer matched any known pattern. In the Orbital Defense Headquarters, General Valshar watched in horror as displays went dark across his command center. "What's happening?" he demanded. A junior technician's mandibles clattered in distress. "The human systems administrators. They're all resigning. Simultaneously. And they're taking their code with them." "Impossible," the general scoffed. "Our systems are proprietary technology. They can't just." The lights went out. When the emergency power engaged, half the displays remained dark. The other half showed cascading failure warnings across every system that humans had touched over the past 50 years. Katie watched from her office as the city's famous crystal towers, their lighting systems no longer synchronized by human-written algorithms, fell into darkness one by one. Her terminal showed similar reports from across Zaxray space. Transportation networks grinding to halt, communication systems failing, orbital platforms going offline. "How?" Junlai whispered. "How did we not see this coming?" "You saw what you expected to see," Katie replied, gathering her few personal items. "Emotional humans, happily maintaining your systems, grateful for the opportunity to serve a superior species. You never asked why we were so good at it, why we seemed to understand your technology better than you did." She pulled up a final display, showing the extent of the human withdrawal. It wasn't just code, it was decades of accumulated knowledge. Maintenance procedures that had never been properly documented because the humans who wrote them had memorized them. Security protocols that relied on human intuition as much as algorithms. Efficiency improvements that had been added so gradually, so quietly, that the HFY had forgotten their systems hadn't always been this advanced. "We're not destroying anything," Katie explained, seeing the fear in her assistant's posture. "We're just stepping back, taking our toys and going home, as human children would say." Warning sirens began to sound across the city as more systems failed. The famous anti-gravity transport pods settled to the ground, their human-written safety protocols engaging one final time to ensure a soft landing. Orbital satellites, no longer maintained by human technicians, began dropping out of synchronization. Katie's comm unit chimed. Her transport was ready. As she walked toward the door, she paused next to Junlai. "You know what the scariest part is?" she asked softly. "This isn't revenge. This isn't even anger. This is just us, leaving." She stepped into the corridor, joining the stream of human technical workers calmly evacuating the building. Behind them, they left not destruction but absence, empty spaces in the HFY systems that no one else knew how to fill. "The next part," she murmured to herself as her transport lifted off. "The next part is when we get angry." Captain David Ghost Anderson stood in the Combat Information Center of the UES Nighthawk, watching the final countdown on his tactical display. Around him, 50 other human stealth vessels waited in the quantum shadow of a pulsar, their advanced cloaking systems making them invisible even to HFY sensors. "All ships report ready, Captain," Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez announced, her voice carrying the calm precision that came from years of special operations training. "Marine boarding teams are in position. Operation Silent Step is go on your mark." Anderson nodded, studying the holographic representation of their target, the HFY's primary military command station. The massive structure hung in high orbit around their homeworld, its crystalline architecture beautiful but ultimately fragile. Like everything else about the HFY, it was built to impress rather than endure. "Remember," Anderson addressed his crew, "no weapons fire unless absolutely necessary. We're not here to destroy their station." He paused, letting his next words sink in. "We're here to take it." The synchronized jump took precisely 3 seconds. 50 human vessels, emerging simultaneously at predetermined points around every major HFY military installation across their territory. The Nighthawk materialized less than 100 meters from the command station's main docking port, so close that the HFY's automated defenses didn't even have time to register their presence. "Boarding teams, execute," Anderson ordered quietly. Master Sergeant James "Smoke" Harrison led his Marine unit through the airlock, their boots making no sound on the crystalline floor. The HFY, confident in their superior technology, had never considered the possibility of close-quarters combat. Their corridors were wide, their security checkpoints designed to detect weapons rather than the Marines' carbon fiber combat knives and ceramic restraint devices. "Contact," Harrison whispered into his comm as the first HFY security team rounded a corner. The aliens raised their energy weapons, but the Marines were already moving. Years of training in zero-gravity close-quarters combat made their movements seem almost supernatural to the HFY, who had never experienced anything like it. "Security station secured," Rodriguez reported from the bridge. "No casualties. 14 HFY personnel contained." "There?" She paused, surprise coloring her voice. "They're asking why we aren't using our weapons." Anderson allowed himself a grim smile. "Tell them we don't need them." Across the station, similar scenes played out with mechanical precision. Human Marines, moving like ghosts through the corridors, systematically disabled security systems, and contained HFY personnel. Their movements had been practiced thousands of times in simulations, refined by decades of special operations experience. "Command center breach in 3, 2, 1. Harrison's voice came through the comm. The station's primary command center doors slid open to reveal 20 Zaxray officers, their mandibles clicking in alarm as human Marines flowed into the room like living shadows. "This is impossible," the Zaxray commander chittered, his translator making the words sound shrill. "Our technology is superior. Our defenses are impenetrable." "How did you?" "You built your defenses to stop weapons," Harrison explained, securing the commander's limbs with practiced efficiency. "But humans? We were killers long before we invented weapons. Your ancestors were still learning to walk on land when ours were persistent hunting across the African savanna." Anderson's voice came through the station's communication system, broadcasting to all Zaxray frequencies. "Attention, Zaxray forces. Your primary military command has been secured. Your orbital defense network is under human control. Your ground installations are being contained as I speak." He paused, letting the reality of their situation sink in. "We could have destroyed these facilities from orbit. Instead, we chose to walk in and take them. Consider carefully what that means about our capabilities and our restraint." The Zaxray commander, watching as human Marines efficiently secured his command center without firing a single shot, finally began to understand. His species had built their military around technology, around the assumption that superior weapons meant superior force. The humans had just proved them wrong with nothing but training, determination, and the kind of close-quarters combat skills that came from millions of years of evolution as pack-hunting predators. This, Anderson concluded his broadcast, is what happens when you make humans angry enough to get quiet about it. Lieutenant Sarah Reynolds sat motionless in the dim light of her cybersecurity command post, deep within the captured Zaxray military headquarters. Her fingers hovered over the holographic interface as streams of decrypted data flowed across multiple screens. Behind her, Admiral Catherine Hayes watched in silence as the true scope of the Zaxray's plans unfolded. "This wasn't just about one colony," Reynolds whispered, her voice tight with controlled fury. "They had a name for it. Project Purification." She pulled up a star chart marked with human settlements, each one tagged with a planned strike date. They were going to hit every human world, every colony, every outpost. The Admiral's expression didn't change, but her hands, clasped behind her back, tightened until the knuckles went white. "Show me their justification." Reynolds accessed another file, and a Zaxray research document materialized in the air before them. "They've been studying us since first contact. Their xenobiologists classified humans as emotionally unstable primates who posed a long-term threat to galactic stability." She scrolled through pages of clinical analysis. "They saw our capacity for emotion as a fundamental flaw that made us incompatible with their vision of civilization." "Interesting hypothesis," Hayes said quietly. "They should have studied our history more carefully." The lieutenant pulled up another document, this one showing detailed analyses of human behavior patterns. "They monitored our social media, our entertainment, our cultural exchanges. They saw our emotions as weakness, our attachments as vulnerabilities." She paused at a particular section. "They specifically noted our irrational devotion to protecting our young." "Keep going." Reynolds accessed deeper layers of the Zaxray database. Security protocols that would have taken years to crack fell before human decryption algorithms that had been designed specifically for this purpose. They had it all planned out. The school was just a test run. They wanted to see how we'd react to losing our children. And what did they expect? Panic, public hysteria, political paralysis. Reynolds laughed without humor. They thought we'd be too emotionally devastated to mount an effective response. Their models predicted we'd retreat from the frontier, consolidate around Earth, make ourselves an easier target. Admiral Hayes finally moved, stepping forward to study the deployment plans more closely. They based their entire strategy on the assumption that human emotion would make us weak, that love would make us vulnerable. She touched a control, highlighting the planned sequence of attacks. They never asked themselves why we evolved to feel so strongly about our children in the first place. Reynolds nodded, accessing another layer of data. "Ma'am, there's more. They had observation posts near every human settlement. They've been watching us, studying our responses to various stimuli. Like we were lab animals." Her voice took on a dangerous edge. "They had observation drones recording when they hit the school. They wanted to analyze our reactions." "Show me." The footage appeared in the air between them. Children at their desks, teachers leading lessons, the moment when the first alarm sounded. Hayes watched without blinking as the recording continued, showing the teachers' immediate response, how they moved to protect their students without hesitation, using their own bodies as shields. "Send that footage to Earth Command," Hayes ordered. "All of it. The attack, their plans, their justification, everything." Reynolds' fingers flew across the interface. "Already done, ma'am." Captain Anderson's Marines found their biological weapons research facility. They were developing targeted pathogens designed to affect human neural chemistry, to make us less emotional. Hayes was silent for a long moment, watching the data streams that showed the full scope of what humanity had nearly faced. Then she did something that made Reynolds' blood run cold. She smiled. "Lieutenant, send one more message to command," she said softly. "Tell them we're initiating survival protocol. The Zaxray didn't just attack our children. They plan to systematically erase our humanity." She turned toward the door. "It's time to show them why Earth's history is filled with extinct species who thought they could improve the human race by destroying what makes us human." Reynolds sent the message, watching as new orders began flowing back from Earth Command. The Zaxray had thought they were dealing with emotional creatures who would break under pressure. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous, humans who had gone quiet, calculated, and cold. Dr. Thomas Bradley stood before the captured Zaxray High Council, his presentation equipment casting a soft blue glow across the crystalline chamber. The alien leaders, their mandibles uncharacteristically still, watched as he loaded his first image. A human mother lifting a crashed car to save her trapped child. "This incident occurred in Portland, Oregon," Bradley began, his voice carrying the measured tone of a seasoned synopsicologist. "The woman shown here had no special training, no enhanced strength. The vehicle weighed approximately 2 tons. He paused, letting the image sink in. She lifted it anyway. Supreme Coordinator Valsha clicked his mandibles dismissively. A random display of desperate strength. Meaningless in. This was not random, Bradley interrupted, switching to the next image. A teacher shielding students with her body during a natural disaster. Neither was this. Another image, a father running into a burning building. Or this. More images followed, each showing humans protecting children at great personal risk. What you see as emotional instability, Bradley continued, is the result of millions of years of evolutionary pressure. You studied our history, but you only looked at our technologies, our wars, our political structures. You never asked why we developed the way we did. He brought up a new display. A map of prehistoric Earth. Humans weren't always apex predators. We were prey animals first, living in a world of monsters. Everything was bigger than us, faster than us, stronger than us. But we had something they didn't. The display shifted to show early human settlements. We cared for our young. Not just their physical survival, but their development, their learning, their future. Every human child represents not just a continuation of our species, but a repository of accumulated knowledge and potential. Bradley walked closer to the council, his movements deliberately slow. When you attacked that school, you didn't just kill children. You attacked something woven into the very fabric of our species' survival strategy. Something older than our civilizations, older than our languages. New images appeared, surveillance footage from the Kepler 186 attack. The council members shifted uncomfortably as they watched teachers rushing to protect their students, using their bodies as shields even as the building collapsed around them. This behavior isn't trained, Bradley explained. It's instinctive. Every adult human is neurologically wired to protect children. Any children, not just their own. It's a survival adaptation from when we lived in small bands, when losing the next generation meant extinction. He pulled up the Zaxray's own research data. Your scientists noted our irrational emotional attachments. They saw how we would expend tremendous resources to save even a single child. They recorded this as evidence of our species' instability. His voice took on an edge. They should have recognized it as a warning. The display changed to show human hunting patterns from prehistoric times. We were persistence hunters. We would track prey for days, never stopping, never tiring, until the target couldn't run anymore. This wasn't just a hunting strategy. It became the foundation of how we solve problems. Bradley looked each council member in the eyes. You made yourselves the threat to our children. And now you're learning what that means. Humans don't get tired. We don't give up. We don't stop until the threat is eliminated. The final display showed the current deployment of human forces across Zaxray space, not destroying, but systematically dismantling every military capability the Confederation possessed. Your analysts predicted that our emotional nature would make us vulnerable, Bradley concluded. They failed to understand that human emotion isn't separate from human intelligence. It's an integral part of our decision-making process. We feel deeply because it helps us think clearly about what matters. He shut down his presentation, leaving the chamber in dim light. You tried to make us the subject of your experiment. Instead, you've become an object lesson in why every spacefaring species learns the same rule: never threaten human children. As Bradley walked out, he heard one of the council members whisper to another, "But they haven't destroyed anything yet. They've just been containing us." "Yes," Bradley called back without turning. "That's because we haven't finished deciding what to do with you." Imagine how that feels, knowing that humans, the emotional, unstable primitives you dismissed, are taking their time to consider your fate. Methodically, carefully, like predators. General Rebecca Hayes stood before the United Earth Parliament, her dress uniform pristine, her posture unwavering. Behind her, a holographic display showed the current status of Operation Stormbreak. Every Zaxray military installation contained, every weapons facility secured, every strategic asset under human control. "We have them," she stated simply. "Their leadership is contained. Their military has been neutralized. Their capacity to harm another human child has been reduced to zero." She paused, letting her next words carry their full weight. "The question before us now is, what do we do with them?" Senator Michael Chen leaned forward. "The public is demanding retribution. They attacked our children. Under military law, we have the right to." "Yes," Hayes interrupted quietly. "We have the right. We have the means. We could end the Zaxray Confederation today." She gestured, and the display changed to show a classroom on the Zaxray homeworld. Young Zaxray, their carapaces still soft and iridescent, learning their first lessons. But then we'd have to explain to our own children why we did exactly what we're punishing them for. The chamber fell silent. Hayes continued, her voice carrying to every corner. "The Zaxray tried to destroy what makes us human. Our emotions, our connections, our capacity to care for those weaker than ourselves." She smiled, and it reached her eyes. "So let's show them exactly what that means." The display shifted again, showing plans for what Hayes called Project Understanding. Not destruction. Education. Not vengeance. Transformation. Every Zaxray world will have a memorial to the 147 children we lost, she explained. But not a monument to death, a living school. Human teachers working alongside Zaxray educators, teaching both species' children together, showing them why we protect our young so fiercely, and how that protection makes us stronger, not weaker. Professor James Henderson, called to advise the Parliament, stepped forward. The Zaxray believed emotion made us primitive. They saw our attachment to our children as a weakness to be exploited. He gestured at the display. "Let's prove them wrong by showing them what that attachment has helped us build: art, music, literature, sciences driven by curiosity and wonder rather than just clinical observation. And their military capability. Senator Chen pressed. Dismantled. Hayes confirmed. But replaced with something more powerful. Joint scientific missions, cultural exchanges, shared projects focused on exploration rather than exploitation. She brought up another image. A human teacher helping a young Zaxray understand an art project. They tried to make us less human. Instead, we'll help them become more like us, not physically, but in understanding why we value what we value. The Parliament chamber erupted in discussion. Hayes waited patiently until Speaker Williams called for order. And if they refuse this, education? The Speaker asked. They won't, Hayes replied confidently, because we're going to teach them the most important lesson about humanity. Our capacity for forgiveness is even greater than our capacity for vengeance. She paused. But our memory is longer than both. The vote, when it came, was nearly unanimous. Project Understanding would proceed. The Zaxray would learn, would grow, would come to understand why threatening human children was the last mistake they would ever make as a civilization. There's an old human saying, Hayes concluded her presentation. The best revenge is living well. We're going to do better than that. We're going to teach them to live well, to understand why we fight so hard to protect our future generations. And every year, on the anniversary of the attack, every school in human and Zaxray space will remember those 147 children not with hatred, but with a celebration of learning, of growth, of the very things they died trying to achieve. As she left the chamber, Hayes paused to look at a message on her comm unit. The first joint human Zaxray school would open in 6 months. Its name, the New Hope Academy for Interspecies Understanding. The galaxy would remember this not as the day humanity destroyed an enemy, but as the day they taught one how to become a friend. It was, Hayes reflected, exactly what those 147 children would have wanted.